Well, hello folks, I'm LA Little and this is your daily NeoTA wrap. We take a look at these markets. We do it from a neoclassical perspective each night, asking ourselves one question: what happened today? What does it tell us about the coming ones? I do the show 4 times a week, every Monday through Thursday. It's broadcast at or before 10 o'clock Eastern Time, archived on YouTube under the channel LA Little. As far as what happened today, we had a nice little bounce again. Had that early bounce into the Fed. They tried to take it down early. It was a gap up, small gap up. They couldn't take it down, reversed it, ended up at the highs, and then sold off a little bit towards the close after the Fed came out and said, you know, we're going to raise rates. Yes, we're going to raise rates. We're not sure when. And it's been that way for a while now. And I don't know how much more you can telegraph that you're going to raise rates without actually raising them, but that seems to still be the story. Yes, we will, but we're not sure when, and when we do, it won't be too much, so don't worry about it. Dollar, up on the news, up 0.5%, and pretty much across the board, gains most everywhere. Bonds were the only thing selling off for the most part. As far as what these markets look like, let's pull up the S&P 500. There's not a lot of information out here today. The S&P was the only one that really did anything significant, and that is that it got over that area that we were talking about last night. It is over it, so you pop up above it. That should have been where you were going to see some sort of a pause if you're going to get it. But instead of getting the pause, it actually did get over it. Now, if we look back and say, okay, well, is that really the right measure? And if I look back over here and look at this price point, that is where volume actually is the highest. And you know, I didn't pick up on this last night, but as I'm looking at it tonight and looking at the rest of the indexes, maybe this is the spot, 2108, 2109, that we should have been looking versus where we are. It goes right up to that area, and that is where it stops. So if I'm looking at this and saying this is it, maybe that is really the spot. Now, assume it's an ABCD structure just to make hay of it. Where's it going to take us? That structure is going to take you right to the bottom, right down to test those lows one more time, if in fact that's what it does. So it's gone up enough at this point to actually get us to a point where a pushback down is really just going to come in to test the lows. Now, that's not going to be the case elsewhere, in particular on the Russell, which I don't have volume on tonight, at least not yet. The Russell got a little bit of a push, but it's just coming into this swing point low to do a retest regen after a pretty good sell-off and after extensions for ABCD structures that finished off on the downside. And what I'm talking about is if you do the biggest one right from here to there, right, using like a weekly chart, you know, you get a structure that goes right back to about where it stopped. You also had this little ABCD structure here that never finished, that now has finished off. So it has done what it's supposed to on the downside, getting its bounce, had more volume than it did on the lows. That says it's probably going to come back and test it again. So, you know, the Russell is still out there saying, you know, we could test lower. NDX, NASDAQ really couldn't move today. They got a little bit of a bounce, but they're not even close to the breakdown bar. They're back over the swing point high on the NDX. And if we look at them on the NASDAQ, they're coming back up towards that swing point high on the NASDAQ, which happens to be coincide with the breakdown bar's high. So I don't know that the indexes are really telling us a lot tonight. If we look overseas, it's the same. Europe bounces again, but inside those big bars from 2 days past, so that's still inside bars, doesn't tell us anything. Shanghai has a nice little push up, but there you don't have any volume, so I'm not sure if that's telling you much of anything. And let me pull those charts up here as we talk about them. Here's Shanghai. So you get a push up last night after, you know, a couple days down, no volume whatsoever, came in right at the end of the night. A lot of people saying it was the government buying at the end. Who knows? And that, of course, is the issue now. There is like, who knows what the market's telling you right now. I'm not sure I can trust it a lot. I'm looking more towards Hang Seng to try to get a gauge on it, but Hang Seng still hanging right at that area that's kind of critical. Going back over to the CACs, you know, here's the look on the CACs. Inside bar, two bars now. So this is the bar. Tomorrow looks like it's going to be more of a a day that's going to tell us something. Do you get follow through off the Fed with that GDP number in the morning? Are we going to get some sort of a sell-off as a result of it? Or are we going back to the top of the range? I don't have a lot of clues here with respect to these markets to use to make that decision. One thing I will note is that we're starting to see the dollar push again, and it looks like it's going to try to make a run towards the top one more time. Here's the push. You got a decent push tonight. If it gets follow through and gets to the top and starts to break it, right, then the dollar is going to go after the highs again. So the dollar probably is something to watch. You've got two nested ABCD structures now. They're small, but they've developed. You've got one here, and I'm on the weekly chart. You got one that points a little bit higher. And then if you take this one though, and if this really is the stop and retrace, restart, that one takes you almost to the highs. So, when I look at the dollar may be getting ready to try to make another run. We had oil bounce pretty good today, but oil was down here beat up pretty bad, so I'm not sure that tells you much. A little bounce and a few other things, but again, I just don't see a lot out here to give us much of a clue as to what's happening. Sector-wise, we did have one significant trade or difference in the sectors tonight, and that's the transports. The transports, if you remember, had gotten almost to the lows of October, or they'd gotten into the highs of the lows in October. They got up and over this swing point low finally. And so that retest regen here suggests that, well, we're probably through going down, which has been going on for months now, and going to go sideways for a while. So when you see something like this, the very first thing to do is go look at the longer term chart and see what it looks like. And as we talked about here, right, we've been going down for a while. So what is this doing? This is trying to come back finally to do the retest regen off that swing point low that it broke some time back, months back actually. That's up around 154.50. So on a weekly basis, right, you still have negativity here. It's just that you came down far enough to where you find some value hunters looking at this. They started buying it. Get a bounce up to here. This will be the test into this area. Be the first test after more than 6 bars. That says it has a very high probability of just shooting around and coming back down again. Now, again, like we did before, let's assume that's the case. What does that mean? So if we come here and we look to see is there a place that we have an ABCD structure, it looks like it's here. Assume it comes back that high. What would that do? That would take you down underneath those lows. So I don't know that the transports are signaling anything different on a longer term basis, even though they are on a shorter term basis. Elsewhere, really not much to talk about in any of the sectors. A few of them could bounce a little bit more, but you're getting kind of extended here again on these bounces. So downside may be more to look at than the upside coming up to the end of the week here. Let's come back one more time though. I want to come back to the S&P 500. And I wrote an article this morning. If you had a chance to read it, great. If not, you might want to flip over and take a look at it. It's this article here, just how long can a range persist? And so if we come back to the S&P 500, put it on a weekly, and you look at this range that's in effect here, this thing's been going on for about 6 months or so, since February. That range at this point still continues to hold, and at this significant date, even though we've had what looks like some sort of a stall, the question still is this consolidation? In other words, are we just consolidating, working off the excesses that we had off these huge runs to the top side? And when I'm talking about huge runs, look at the monthly. This has been a huge run for an unprecedented period of time without any kind of large correction. So if we go back to the August lows 2011, right, and press it up, we had 4 years of uninterrupted returns to the upside. That spike higher, I'm sure there's been some historically that have done that, has led us to this point where we're now range trading up here at the top. Now maybe that is going to be a rollover. Maybe it's consolidation before it actually continues the trend and moves higher. That's a possibility, right? The other possibility is that this is distribution before they start selling it. You never know that until it actually starts doing something, and what it has to do, of course, is break the range. And in this case, it's pretty clear cut where the range is, and it's also pretty clear cut what the early warning signals would be if it were to break. And in particular, that swing point low is kind of a key area now, because every time it's come down and tried to break it, it's bounced right off of it. So if we see that swing point low break, it's going to have to raise a few eyebrows. That's the May 4th date. Number on the bottom's 2068 roughly. That has to break before you really get some damage. If it does break and holds, in other words on a weekly basis, that may give you some sort of an early warning if you're still hanging in there long and waiting. That's it for tonight. We'll see what tomorrow's GDP number is. That'll wrap up the week, and we'll talk about it tomorrow night. I think that's going to be kind of a key number. That is the key number this week in terms of numbers, economic numbers. We still get earnings. I saw Facebook tonight, for example. Looks like they sold off a little bit, nothing big. Apple can't move at this point. A lot of your big cap techs, some of those that reported that first week that jumped like crazy have given up half those gains already. So we're kind of stuck in the mud up here at this point, and that hasn't changed, and this range kind of exemplifies that is taking place. So until next time, I'll leave it at that. Have a great one. See you then. Good night.